Our second speaker is Maia Majumder, who's an engineering systems PhD candidate at MIT and a computational epidemiology research fellow at Health Lab. Before coming to MIT, she earned a Bachelor's of Science in Engineering Science and a Master's of Public Health in Epidemiology and Biostatistics at Tufts. Her research interests involve probabilistic modeling, data mining, and systems epidemiology in the context of public health. She also enjoys exploring novel techniques for data procurement, writing about data for the general public, and creating meaningful data visualizations. As a freelance data journalist, she has recently conducted analyses on fatal police shootings and post-election hate crimes in the US. So with that, I'll let Maya take the stage.
Awesome, thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm really glad to be here. As Justin just noted, I am a double jumbo, which around here means that I have 2 degrees from Tufts. I love this place, and I'm so excited that Moon and everybody that's organizing this conference is taking on such an incredible endeavor, and especially thanks to you guys for being here at now 7:49 on a Tuesday evening. So without further ado, as Justin just mentioned, I'm a computational epidemiologist, and in short, that means that I like to use news and social media, kind of novel, non-traditional data sources to better understand public health trends. So in public health, because that's my background in part, we believe that awareness is critical to enabling and ensuring public-centered action. So within the context of gerrymandering, my favorite example is citizen phone calls to state representatives. When they know that gerrymandering is a problem, they can be enabled to actually do something about it. And that includes not just, citizens of gerrymandered districts, that includes all of us. So because of this, the questions I'm most interested in when it comes to gerrymandering are a little bit different than I think what a lot of the content of the conference has been about so far, which is pretty exciting. And for me, the real focus that I would like to place on my brief talk today is on awareness. How much do we actually know about gerrymandering as a population, and how heterogeneous or homogeneous is that awareness across the United States? And so with that in mind, there are 2 primary questions that I'm going to be kind of talking about with y'all today. So the first is, how does gerrymandering awareness vary across the United States? And if it does vary, does awareness of gerrymandering correlate with presence of gerrymandering? So ideally, we would hope that the most affected areas, the areas that have the most gerrymandering, would also feature individuals that are most interested or aware of it. But the real question is that really the case or not? So to address the first question, I used Google Trends data to assess gerrymandering awareness across the United States. Here's a map of the US broken down by Nielsen DMAs, or designated market areas, which we can talk about a little bit later if anybody's interested. And darker shades represent greater population adjusted search interest in gerrymandering relative to lighter ones. Google Trends data essentially serves as a proxy indicator for awareness. And this is a real kind of interesting source of data that my colleagues and I at Harvard Medical and at MIT have kind of been using probably for the last 3 or 4 years. And in general, it's a pretty damn good measure of how aware or how interested people are in a certain topic. When people Google about something, it usually means that they're interested or aware of it. So with that in mind, from this map, we can see that gerrymandering awareness varies considerably across DMAs in the US. But thinking back to question 2, it becomes kind of really obvious, the next question, I suppose. Is this heterogeneity that we're seeing in this map actually correlated with presence of gerrymandering across the United States? And so to address this question, I combined the aforementioned gerrymandering awareness data, this time at the state level, with state level gerrymandering metric data, and ran a quick regression analysis to see whether or not a relationship existed. So here we see a number of different visuals. At this point, I will note that these slides will be available online, so you guys can kind of click through and zoom in and see what's actually going on at kind of at your own pace, but I'll quickly run through these for now. So to the left is a multi-panel visual. The map up top shows population-adjusted search interest in gerrymandering by states, while the bar graphs on the bottom show various state-level gerrymandering metrics in shades of gray, matched against search interest in orange for each state. To the right are correlation charts for each of the 4 gerrymandering metrics shown, plotted against our gerrymandering awareness proxy for any state with more than 1 voting district. So that's n equals 43 states. Polsby-Popper is shown top left, Schwartzberg is top right, Convex Hull is bottom left, and Rioch is bottom right. As is easy to see from these scatter plots, awareness of gerrymandering seems to actually be negatively correlated with presence of gerrymandering. In other words, states with more gerrymandering seem to actually be less aware of gerrymandering than states that have less gerrymandering. Though this relationship is weak, it's meaningful because it's the opposite of what we want to be seeing. So the natural question next is, why is this happening? Why are folks living in heavily gerrymandered states less likely to be searching for gerrymandering? And in general, what that really means is, why are they less likely to be aware of it? And how can we develop interventions that might mitigate the situation? I don't think we have an answer to this question yet, but my colleagues and I are working on it. One thing is certain, though, we have an awareness problem. Thankfully, the public-centered agenda to address this problem is pretty clear. First, we need to prioritize awareness campaigns in heavily gerrymandered regions. And second, we need to monitor and evaluate the progress of these campaigns over time and at multiple scales to assess which ones worked and, which ones didn't. The first half of the agenda is largely contingent on where we choose to spend our money, which is a bigger problem and bigger question that is better saved for another time. But when it comes to the second half of the agenda, one possible way to monitor and evaluate awareness campaigns is, again, once to turn more to Google Trends. In addition to offering geospatial trends, Google Trends offers data on temporal trends as well. So with that, we can start to assess the efficacy of different interventions that we might be placing to increase awareness of gerrymandering across the country. Here's a look at how search interest in gerrymandering has changed at the national level between election 2016 and present, shown in gray. Similar to the spatial data that I shared earlier, the temporal data shown here are adjusted against peak interest within the specified time range. As can be seen here, interest in our time range was highest on June 19th, when the Supreme Court announced that it would be taking up an important redistricting case involving line drawing in Wisconsin, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. And this particular case may have resounding repercussions for the rest of the country as well. Ideally, we'd like to see awareness campaigns prompt peaks in search interest similar to this. Granted, the national scale isn't enough to tell us about localized awareness interventions. So here's a look at how search interest has varied in Massachusetts, right here, overlaid, shown in orange, on top of the national search interest. Clearly, statewide interest adheres pretty closely to national interest over time, but if we take a look at June 22nd, which is kind of pointed out with this arrow here, we see that Massachusetts experienced a small secondary peak following the June 19th peak. And that's a peak that the rest of the US actually didn't experience. So this seems to coincide with an excellent piece that was published in the Boston Globe called "The Jerry Behind Gerrymandering." This, in my opinion, is a terrific example of how a more localized event or intervention can prompt a measurable signature in the search interest and awareness of citizens. As we start to think about how awareness campaigns should be designed to best meet the needs of those that are most affected by gerrymandering, I believe that tools like Google Trends and other non-traditional data sources provide an awesome low-cost alternative to more traditional intervention monitoring and evaluation methods. And on that note, I would like to extend my gratitude once more to the conference organizers and to all of you guys for being here. Again, I'll be posting these slides to my blog, and we'll be tweeting about that when I do. And I'll also make sure to talk to Moon about putting these slides up in a way that's accessible for everyone. So at this point, I'm happy to take a couple of questions while we set up our next speaker. And otherwise, thanks, everyone.
All right. Excellent. You guys are already swapping. So one quick question for you, Maia. So how different are gerrymandering awareness maps from just simple population densities? Like, do you think those things are correlated?
That's a great question. So one thing that Google Trends does is that it actually adjusts for population. So one thing that I personally really like about Google Trends as a data source is that a lot of kind of behind the scenes adjustment happens to kind of make it easier to compare, say, Iowa to Massachusetts, where you have different population densities cities, and you may even have different internet penetration levels. So in general, that's actually something that we're not so concerned about with Google Trends. One thing that I personally think is really interesting is that at least between election 2016 and now, Vermont has the highest amount of interest in gerrymandering compared to any other state in the US. Of course, Vermont also doesn't have much, if any, gerrymandering, because if I remember correctly, I think it's only one district. Now, with that said, it kind of really makes me think, and I hope it makes everyone in here think, why do we see more interest in some areas than others, and what can we do to increase interest and awareness in places that might benefit most from it?